She shattered husband betrayal plan, how a genius black woman changed a finance billionaire's world forever. Welcome to Mr. Peter Story's Merry Christmas to everyone. Let's embark on this amazing journey together, where your beautiful lips will be smiling with joy and excitement every step of the way. Let's make every moment unforgettable. We're so glad you're here to celebrate this magical season with us. During this time of joy and love, we warmly welcome you to a brand new story created just for you. Before we begin, tell us, what's your name? Are you a regular visitor, or is this your first time here? We'd love to get to know you better. Now get ready to dive into a tale full of emotions, surprises, and unforgettable moments. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community. Let's start the story. The September sunrise painted Manhattan's skyline in strokes of amber and gold, its warm light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Vance Draven's corner office on the 88th floor. At 35, he stood like a colossus atop his financial empire, watching the city below come alive with the familiar rhythm of another Monday morning. The Wall Street Journal had recently dubbed him the Oracle of Manhattan, a title he found both amusing and slightly irritating. Yes, he had built Draven Enterprises from a modest inheritance into a global powerhouse worth billions. Yes, his investment strategies had revolutionized modern finance. And yes, at 35, he was the youngest CEO ever to make the Fortune 100. But titles meant little to him. Results were what mattered. Vance adjusted his platinum cufflinks, a gift from his late father on his 21st birthday, and ran a hand through his meticulously styled dark hair. His reflection in the window showed what the world expected to see: impeccably tailored Tom Ford suit, Italian leather shoes polished to a mirror shine, and the stern expression that had become his trademark, the face of modern American success. But this morning, something felt different. Perhaps it was the way the light caught the glass buildings surrounding his tower. Or maybe it was the strange dream that had pulled him from sleep at 4 a.m. A dream he couldn't quite remember, but had left him feeling oddly restless. His intercom buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. "Mr. Draven?" His executive assistant's voice was crisp and professional. "Your 9 a.m. interview candidate has arrived. Shall I send her up?" Vance checked his Patek Philippe watch, 8:57 a.m. "She's early," he noted, more to himself than to his assistant. In an industry where being on time meant being late, this was a promising start. "Give me 2 minutes, then send her up." He walked to his desk, a masterpiece of modern design in glass and brushed steel, and pulled up the candidate's file on his tablet. Winifred Walker, 22 years old, recent graduate of MIT, summa cum laude. Dual major in business administration and computer science, perfect GPA, presidential scholar. Her resume read like a wish list for any Fortune 500 company. But it wasn't her credentials that had caught his attention when HR had forwarded her application. It was her thesis, revolutionizing financial markets through quantum computing and AI integration. He had read it twice, something he never did. Her ideas were bold, innovative, and exactly what Draven Enterprises needed to stay ahead in an increasingly competitive market. A soft knock at his door preceded his assistant's entrance. "Miss Walker is here, sir." "Send her in." The woman who walked into his office was not what he expected. In an industry dominated by power suits and aggressive styling, Winifred Walker projected a different kind of confidence. She wore a navy blazer over a cream silk blouse, paired with tailored trousers that spoke of quality without flaunting designer labels. Her natural hair was styled in elegant twists, and she carried herself with a grace that seemed both professional and entirely natural. "Good morning, Mr. Draven," she said, her voice clear and confident. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me." Vance gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please, sit." As she moved across the room, he noticed she carried a leather portfolio, not the latest tablet or smartphone that most candidates clutched like lifelines. Interesting. I must admit, he began, your thesis caught my attention. Not many recent graduates are proposing solutions that could fundamentally change how global markets operate. A smile touched her lips, reaching her eyes that he now noticed were an unusual shade of amber, almost golden in the morning light. Most recent graduates aren't thinking big enough, she replied. The financial industry is on the cusp of a major transformation, but too many firms are so focused on quarterly results that they're missing the bigger picture. Vance leaned back in his chair, studying her. And what picture is that, Miss Walker? Without hesitation, she opened her portfolio and pulled out several hand-drawn diagrams. The integration of quantum computing isn't just about faster transactions or better risk analysis. It's about fundamentally changing how we understand and interact with global markets. She spread the diagrams across his desk. These are my initial designs for a new type of trading algorithm that could... For the next hour, Vance found himself engaged in one of the most stimulating technical discussions he'd had in years. Winifred didn't just understand the concepts. She saw connections and possibilities that even his most experienced team members hadn't considered. She challenged his assumptions respectfully but firmly, backing every argument with solid data and innovative thinking. As she explained her vision for the future of financial technology, Vance noticed something else. She spoke with genuine passion. This wasn't just about making money or climbing the corporate ladder. She truly believed in the power of technology to transform the industry for the better. Your ideas are ambitious, he said finally, after she had finished outlining her proposed implementation strategy. Some might say too ambitious for someone just starting their career. Winifred met his gaze steadily. With respect, Mr. Draven, isn't that exactly what they said about you when you started Draven Enterprises? Sometimes the most valuable perspective is the one that isn't bound by traditional limitations. A ghost of a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. In an industry where most people either feared him or tried to flatter him, her directness was refreshing. She had done her research, not just on the company, but on him personally, and wasn't afraid to use that knowledge. Standing, Vance walked to the windows, his back to her. The morning sun had risen fully now, and the city buzzed with energy far below. Tell me, Miss Walker, why Draven Enterprises? With your credentials, you could have your pick of positions at any firm on Wall Street. He heard her stand and move to join him at the window, keeping a respectful distance. Because Draven Enterprises isn't just any firm, she said quietly. You're not just trading stocks or managing wealth. You're shaping the future of global finance. But more than that, you've never lost sight of the human element in business. Your charitable foundation's work in bringing financial education to underserved communities shows that you understand the responsibility that comes with power. Vance turned to look at her, surprised by her answer. Most candidates spoke about their desire for success or their admiration of the company's profit margins. Few mentioned the foundation's work, and fewer still understood its significance to him personally. The position you're applying for, he said, changing tack, would normally go to someone with at least 10 years of experience in the industry. Then they would have 10 years of habits and preconceptions to unlearn, she countered. Sometimes fresh eyes see clearest. For a long moment, he said nothing, just studied her. There was something about Winifred Walker that defied easy categorization. She had the technical brilliance he needed, combined with an understanding of human nature that was rare in their industry. But it was more than that. She had a presence, an authenticity that stood out in a world of carefully crafted personas. Making his decision, Vance returned to his desk and pressed the intercom. Janet, Please have HR prepare an offer package for Miss Walker. Executive track, full benefits starting immediately. He looked up to see surprise flash across Winifred's face, quickly replaced by a composed smile. Thank you, Mr. Draven. I won't let you down. I know you won't, he replied, standing to shake her hand. As their hands met, he felt an unexpected jolt of electricity run through him. Her hand was warm, her grip firm but not aggressive. For a brief moment, their eyes locked, and something unspoken passed between them. Quickly, professionally, they both stepped back. HR will contact you this afternoon with the details, Vance said, his voice perhaps a fraction less steady than usual. I look forward to seeing what you'll accomplish here. As Winifred gathered her materials and walked to the door, she paused and turned back. Mr. Draven, thank you for taking a chance on me. I promise you won't regret it. After she left, Vance stood at his window for a long time, watching the city below. Something had shifted in his perfectly ordered world, though he couldn't quite name what it was. All he knew was that his life would never be quite the same after this morning. That evening, as his driver navigated through Manhattan's busy streets, Vance found himself thinking about Winifred Walker, about her intelligence, her confidence, her genuine passion for the work, about the way the morning light had caught her eyes, making them shine like amber. He shook his head, pushing the thoughts aside. She was an employee now, nothing more. A brilliant mind that would help take Draven Enterprises to the next level. Any other thoughts were inappropriate and unprofessional, but as he settled into his penthouse that night, pouring himself a glass of 30-year-old scotch, he couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous had begun that morning. Something that would change not just his company, but his life itself. Looking out over the glittering cityscape, Vance Draven, the man who had built an empire on perfect decisions, wondered if he had just made the most important decision of his life. And for the first time in his career, he wasn't thinking about profit margins or market share. He was thinking about the way Winifred Walker's eyes lit up when she talked about changing the world. Chapter 2. The Dance of Professionalism. October painted Central Park in brilliant shades of red and gold, but from the 88th floor of Draven Tower, autumn's splendor was just a distant canvas. Inside, Winifred Walker was already making waves. 3 weeks into her position at Draven Enterprises, she had established herself as a force to be reckoned with. Her desk, positioned strategically at the intersection of the trading floor and the executive offices, had become a hub of innovation. Senior traders who had initially scoffed at taking direction from a 22-year-old now found themselves lingering near her workspace, hoping to catch her insights on market trends. Vance watched it all from his office, pride and something else stirring in his chest each time he heard her name mentioned in executive meetings. Walker's new algorithm, they'd say, or Walker's projection models. In 3 weeks she had become indispensable. On this particular morning, Vance stood in the doorway of the main conference room, observing as Winifred presented her latest analysis to the board. She wore a burgundy dress that complemented her skin tone perfectly, but it was her presence that commanded attention. Her hands moved gracefully as she explained complex market patterns, her voice confident and clear. The traditional models aren't accounting for the emergence of AI-driven microtransactions, she was saying, pulling up a holographic display that showed market movements in real time. We're seeing patterns that human analysts simply can't process fast enough to act upon. And you believe your quantum-based algorithm can catch these patterns? Asked Bernard Matthews, one of the most conservative board members. His tone carried a hint of skepticism that made Vance's jaw tighten. Winifred's response was diplomatic but firm. Not just catch them, Mr. Matthews. Predict them. She manipulated the hologram, zooming in on a particular market segment. This morning, Our prototype system flagged an anomaly in Asian markets 3 minutes before traditional algorithms detected it. Those 3 minutes represented a potential profit of $17 million, Vance finished, stepping into the room. All heads turned toward him. I've been monitoring the system's performance myself. Miss Walker's innovation isn't just an improvement on our current methods, it's a paradigm shift. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, the air seemed to crackle with unspoken understanding. Winifred's expression remained professional, but her eyes held a warmth that made Vance's heart beat just a little faster. The meeting continued, but the dynamic had shifted. With Vance's explicit support, even the most skeptical board members began engaging more constructively with Winifred's ideas. By the end of the presentation, several division heads were practically fighting for her attention, eager to implement her system in their departments. As the room cleared, Vance lingered, pretending to review documents on his tablet. Winifred was gathering her materials, her movements precise and efficient. "Thank you for the support, Mr. Draven," she said quietly once they were alone. "Though I hope you don't make a habit of rescuing me from tough questions." He looked up, caught off guard by her directness. "You hardly needed rescuing. I simply stated facts." "Still," she smiled, "it's nice to know the CEO has your back." She paused, then added, "The system actually predicted an $18 million opportunity, but I didn't want to sound boastful." Vance felt the corner of his mouth twitch. "Modesty doesn't suit our industry, Miss Walker. If you have the numbers to back it up, own them." "Please," she said, meeting his gaze, "call me Winifred. Miss Walker makes me feel like I'm being sent to the principal's office." The moment the words left her mouth, a subtle blush colored her cheeks. Vance found it endearing, though he quickly pushed that thought aside. "Winifred, then," he said, testing the name on his tongue. It felt intimate somehow. Their interaction was interrupted by Janet, Vance's assistant, appearing at the door. "Mr. Draven, your 11 a.m. is waiting." The spell broken, they both shifted back into strictly professional modes. "Good work today," Vance said, gathering his things. "Keep me updated on the system's performance." "Of course, Mr. Draven." As he walked to his next meeting, Vance couldn't shake the memory of how his name had sounded on her lips, or the way her eyes had sparkled when she revealed the true prediction numbers. He was in dangerous territory, and he knew it. The weeks that followed established a pattern. Late-night strategy sessions became their norm, with Winifred's innovative approaches challenging Vance's traditional methodologies. They would sit in his office, surrounded by holographic displays of market data, debating investment strategies until the city lights below outshone the stars above. One such night, as they reviewed projections for an upcoming Asian market expansion, Winifred surprised him with a question. "Why did you really hire me?" she asked, looking up from her tablet. "And don't say it was just because of my thesis." Vance set down his coffee cup, considering his response carefully. "Because you weren't afraid," he said finally. "Not of the technology, not of the challenges, and not of me." She raised an eyebrow. "Should I be afraid of you?" "Most people are," he admitted. "The Oracle of Manhattan isn't known for his warm and fuzzy personality." Winifred laughed, a sound that seemed to brighten the whole room. "Well, they clearly haven't seen you at 2 a.m. arguing about cryptocurrency fluctuations with your tie undone and coffee stains on your shirt." Vance glanced down at his pristine white shirt, then back at her, amused. "I don't have coffee stains on my shirt." "Not yet," she grinned, reaching for her own cup, "but the night is young." These moments became more frequent, little cracks in their professional facades where something more personal shone through. They learned each other's habits, How Vance always loosened his tie 2 turns when deep in thought, how Winifred tucked her hair behind her right ear when she was about to challenge an assumption, how they both preferred their coffee black with just a hint of cinnamon. The office noticed, of course. Whispers followed them through the corridors, but their work spoke louder than any rumors. Under their combined leadership, Draven Enterprises' trading division posted record profits for 3 consecutive months. Yet it wasn't all smooth sailing. One particularly tense morning, Winifred stormed into Vance's office, her usual composure cracked. "Did you know about this?" she demanded, throwing a report on his desk. "They're trying to patent my algorithm under someone else's name." Vance was on his feet immediately, anger flashing in his eyes as he scanned the document. "Who?" "Matthews's team. They're claiming they'll find my work enough to make it their own." Her voice trembled with rage and hurt. Without a word, Vance picked up his phone. "Janet, get me legal, now." He looked at Winifred, his expression fierce. "No one steals from my team, ever." The way he said "my team" made something flutter in Winifred's chest, but she pushed the feeling aside. This was business, nothing more. Even if the way he was defending her made her want to. The patent issue was resolved within hours, with Matthews's team facing severe repercussions. That evening, Vance had a bottle of champagne delivered to Winifred's desk with a note, "Your name on the patent, as it should be. V." She kept the note in her desk drawer, telling herself it was just for professional documentation. By December, their dynamic had evolved into something neither of them could quite define. They moved in perfect sync during meetings, anticipating each other's thoughts and finishing each other's sentences. The board had taken to calling them the Dream Team, though some said it with more skepticism than others. On the last working day before Christmas, Vance found himself alone with Winifred in the elevator, heading down to the lobby. She wore a deep green dress that made her skin glow, and he had to force himself to look at the floor numbers instead of her reflection in the mirrored walls. "Any plans for the holidays?" he asked, attempting normal conversation. "Just me and a stack of market analyses," she smiled. "The quantum system needs some fine-tuning before the new year." The elevator stopped at the lobby, and they both stepped out into the quieting building. Outside, snow was falling gently over Manhattan. "Winifred," Vance said suddenly, surprising himself, Would you like to get coffee sometime? To discuss the system upgrades, of course." She turned to look at him, snowflakes catching in her hair like stars. For a moment, he thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. Hope? Fear? But then her professional mask slipped back into place. "Of course, Mr. Draven. Have your assistant contact mine to set it up." They parted ways in the lobby, each heading toward their respective cars, both pretending they couldn't feel the weight of everything unsaid between them. That night, in his penthouse, Vance stood at his window watching the snow fall over the city. He thought about Winifred's laugh, about the way her mind challenged his at every turn, about how the office felt empty on the rare days she worked from home. "This is dangerous," he told his reflection in the window, but even as he said it, he knew it was too late. The lines between professional admiration and personal attraction had begun to blur, and neither of them seemed able or entirely willing to stop it. The dance of professionalism was becoming more complex with each passing day, and somewhere deep down, they both knew that eventually something would have to give. Chapter 3. Breaking Walls. January arrived with a crystalline beauty that transformed Manhattan into a glittering wonderland. From his office, Vance watched the early morning sun catch the frost on neighboring buildings, creating prismatic displays that seemed to mirror the shifting emotions in his heart. The coffee-to-discuss system upgrades he'd suggested before Christmas had turned into a regular occurrence. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, they met at a small cafe 3 blocks from the office. It was a quiet place, with worn leather armchairs and brick walls lined with books, far from the sleek coffee chains that dominated the financial district. On this particular morning, Vance arrived early, as he always did. The owner, an elderly Italian man named Marco, nodded in recognition and began preparing their usual orders. An Americano with a hint of cinnamon for him, and a café au lait with vanilla for Winifred. She arrived precisely at 7:30, snowflakes dusting her charcoal wool coat. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, and her smile when she saw him made his heart skip a beat, something he would never admit to anyone, least of all himself. "I think I've solved the latency issue in the Asian markets," she said by way of greeting, pulling out her tablet as she settled into her usual armchair across from him. But Vance noticed something different in her eyes today, a shadow of exhaustion that concerned him. "When did you leave the office last night?" She waved off his question, focusing on pulling up charts and data. "Early enough." "Winifred." His tone made her look up. "When?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair, a gesture he'd come to recognize as a sign of her letting her guard down. "Around 3. But I had a breakthrough with the quantum processing speed, and I couldn't just leave it." "You need rest," he said softly, surprising himself with the gentleness in his voice. "The markets will still be there tomorrow." Their eyes met over their coffee cups, and something shifted in the air between them. For a moment, they weren't CEO and employee, weren't the Oracle of Manhattan and his brilliant protégé. They were just Vance and Winifred, two people sharing a quiet moment in a warm cafe while winter raged outside. "You know," she said, her voice thoughtful, "I've never seen you wear anything but suits. Even on weekends when you come to the office, it's always perfect tailoring and power ties." Vance raised an eyebrow. "Are you critiquing my wardrobe, Miss Walker?" "Just making an observation, Mr. Draven." She smiled, and something in his chest tightened. "Don't you ever just relax?" The question caught him off guard. When was the last time he had truly relaxed? Before his father's death, before the weight of the Draven legacy had settled onto his shoulders. "I find work relaxing," he said finally. Winifred leaned forward, her expression serious. "That's not what I asked, and you know it." Their coffee grew cold as the conversation drifted away from market analyses and trading algorithms. For the first time, they talked about real things, about Vance's childhood in the shadow of his father's empire, about Winifred's mother who had worked 3 jobs to put her through college, about dreams and fears and the price of success. "Sometimes," Winifred admitted, "I wake up thinking this has all been a dream, that I'll open my eyes and be back in my tiny apartment in Cambridge, eating ramen and worrying about final exams." "Do you miss it?" Vance asked, genuinely curious. "The simplicity?" She considered this, absent-mindedly stirring her second cup of coffee. "Parts of it. But I've always believed we're meant to evolve, to grow beyond our comfort zones." Her eyes met his. "Don't you ever wonder what you might be missing, staying inside your carefully constructed walls?" The question hit too close to home. Vance stood abruptly, checking his watch. "We should head to the office. The Tokyo markets open soon." But something had changed. In the weeks that followed, their coffee meetings became longer, more personal. Work talk gave way to discussions about books they loved, places they wanted to visit, memories that had shaped them. Vance found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone, about the pressure of being a Draven, about the loneliness at the top, about his secret dream of learning to sail. One evening, long after most of the staff had gone home, Vance found himself standing in the doorway of Winifred's office. She was focused on her computer screen, her face illuminated by its blue light, a strand of hair falling across her cheek. Without thinking, he stepped forward to brush it back. The moment his fingers touched her skin, electricity seemed to course through them both. Winifred froze, her breath catching. Vance pulled back as if burned, but the sensation of her soft skin lingered on his fingertips. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "That was inappropriate." "Was it?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it echoed in the quiet office like thunder. Their eyes met, and all the carefully constructed walls between them trembled. Vance could feel his heart pounding, could see the pulse fluttering in Winifred's throat. The air seemed charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. "We should—" he started, but couldn't finish the thought. Should what? Maintain professional distance? Pretend they didn't feel this growing connection? Ignore the way his whole world seemed to shift on its axis when she smiled? "Yes," Winifred agreed, though neither of them was sure what they were agreeing to. "We should." The next day, Vance cancelled their coffee meeting, citing a breakfast with investors. The day after, Winifred had an early conference call. They both knew they were avoiding the inevitable, but neither knew how to bridge the gap between what they should do and what they wanted to do. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. On a Friday evening in late January, a major crisis hit the Asian markets. Winifred's quantum system was the first to detect the anomaly, potentially saving Draven Enterprises millions. As they worked through the night to manage the situation, the walls between them crumbled bit by bit. At 3 a.m, with the crisis finally contained, they found themselves alone in Vance's office, exhausted but triumphant. Snow was falling outside, coating the city in silence. "We make a good team," Winifred said softly, standing by the window. Vance moved to stand beside her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her body, but not quite touching. "We do." She turned to face him, and in her eyes he saw everything he'd been trying to deny. "Vance," she said, and his name on her lips was like a prayer and a challenge all at once. "This is complicated," he whispered, even as he found himself drawing closer to her. "Life is complicated," she answered. "Doesn't mean we should hide from it." The city lights sparkled below them like fallen stars, and in that moment, all the reasons they shouldn't, professional boundaries, corporate politics, potential scandal, seemed to fade away. There was only this, the snow falling outside, the warmth between them, and the undeniable truth that some walls are meant to be broken. Vance reached out slowly, giving her time to step away if she wanted to. Instead, she moved closer, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, right over his heart. He wondered if she could feel how fast it was beating, how every fiber of his being seemed to vibrate with the nearness of her. "Breaking walls is dangerous," he murmured, even as his hand came up to cup her cheek. Winifred smiled, and in that smile was every late-night conversation, every shared laugh, every moment of understanding that had brought them to this point. Some things are worth the risk. When their lips finally met, it wasn't fireworks or thunder or any of the cliches. It was like coming home to a place neither of them had known they were seeking. It was soft and sweet and tinged with the taste of coffee and possibility. It was everything they'd been holding back and everything they'd been afraid to want. When they finally parted, the snow was still falling, the city was still sleeping, and nothing and everything had changed. "Now what?" Winifred asked, her forehead resting against his. Vance smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually stern features. "Now we figure it out together." As dawn began to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, they stood together by the window, watching the city wake up. The walls between them had crumbled, leaving something far more precious in their place: trust, understanding, and the beginning of love. They both knew there would be challenges ahead, office politics to navigate, boundaries to redefine, judgments to face. But in that moment, with the morning sun casting long shadows across the office floor, none of that seemed to matter. They had broken through the walls that separated them, and whatever came next, they would face it together. Chapter 4. Love Blooms. February painted Manhattan in shades of steel and silver, but for Vance and Winifred, the world had never seemed more colorful. Their first official date happened on a Saturday evening, away from the watchful eyes of Wall Street. Vance had chosen an intimate restaurant in Brooklyn, far from the power dining spots where financial titans held court. Housed in a converted brownstone, with exposed brick walls and candlelight casting warm shadows, it was a place where they could just be themselves. Winifred arrived wearing a deep purple dress that made Vance momentarily forget how to breathe. Her hair was styled in loose curls, and she wore simple pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. The sight of her, free from the constraints of corporate attire, struck him with an almost physical force. "You look stunning," he said softly, rising to greet her. She smiled, taking in his appearance, dark jeans and a cashmere sweater that replaced his usual suit. "So do you. I was beginning to think you were born in a three-piece suit." The maitre d' led them to a private table in a corner alcove, where vintage jazz played softly and the cityscape sparkled through leaded glass windows. As they settled in, both felt the strange liberation of being outside their usual environment. "I have a confession," Winifred said after their wine had been poured. "I've never actually been on a proper date like this." Vance raised an eyebrow. "I find that hard to believe." She shrugged, a gesture somehow both elegant and vulnerable. "I was always focused on my studies, then my career. There never seemed to be time for—" She gestured between them. "This." "And now?" "Now." She met his eyes over the rim of her wineglass. "I'm finding that some things are worth making time for." The evening unfolded like a dream. They talked about everything and nothing, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Vance told her about his first failed attempt at trading stocks at 16, using his birthday money. Winifred shared stories about coding her first program at 12, determined to create a system that could predict weather patterns. "My mother thought I was crazy," she laughed. "Spending all my time in front of a computer instead of playing outside, but I was convinced I could create something revolutionary." "And you did," Vance said softly. "You're revolutionizing an entire industry." As they walked through Brooklyn Bridge Park after dinner, the Manhattan skyline glittering across the river, Winifred slipped her hand into his. The simple gesture felt more intimate than their first kiss. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," she said, as they paused to watch a ferry glide past. Vance was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "I never wanted to be CEO," he finally admitted. "When my father died, everyone assumed I would take over. The board, the shareholders, the media, they all had these expectations. Nobody ever asked what I wanted." "What did you want?" "I wanted to build things. Not empires or fortunes, but actual innovations. I used to spend hours in my father's garage, taking apart computers and putting them back together." He smiled ruefully. "But Dravens don't tinker in garages. We run companies." Winifred turned to face him, her eyes serious in the moonlight. "It's not too late, you know. You can still build things. Look at what we're doing with the quantum system. That's innovation. That's building something real." He reached up to cup her cheek, marveling at how she could see straight to the heart of things. "How do you do that? Do what? Make everything seem possible." Their second kiss was different from their first, slower, deeper, filled with understanding and promise. When they finally parted, Winifred rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she whispered. Instead of panic or hesitation, Vance felt only peace. "I think I'm already there." The weeks that followed were like something out of a dream. At work, They maintained their professional demeanor, but stolen glances and brief touches carried worlds of meaning. After hours, they explored the city together, finding joy in simple things: bookstore wanderings, quiet dinners, long walks through Central Park. One rainy Sunday, Vance showed up at Winifred's apartment with takeout and a stack of old science journals. She answered the door in sweatpants and one of his sweaters she'd borrowed, her hair in a messy bun, and he thought she'd never looked more beautiful. They spent the afternoon on her couch, reading articles about quantum computing and arguing playfully about theoretical physics. When thunder crashed outside, Winifred curled closer into his side, and Vance realized with stunning clarity that this simple, perfect moment was everything he'd never known he wanted. "Move in with me," he said suddenly. Winifred looked up from her journal, surprised. "What?" "Move in with me," he repeated, more certain now. "I know it's fast, and I know there will be talk, but I don't care. I want to wake up with you every morning. I want to argue about quantum mechanics on rainy Sundays. I want—" She silenced him with a kiss. "Yes," she said simply. The news of their relationship eventually leaked to the office, as they knew it would. There were whispers, of course, accusations of favoritism, speculation about motives. But those who worked closely with them saw the truth. Two brilliant minds who challenged and complemented each other, whose connection made them both better. The board was less enthusiastic. At an emergency meeting, Bernard Matthews voiced what others had only implied. This could destabilize the entire company. Vance's response was characteristically direct. "My personal life is not up for discussion. Judge us by our results." And the results spoke for themselves. Under their combined leadership, Draven Enterprises wasn't just profitable. It was revolutionary. Their quantum trading system was changing the face of global finance, and their partnership, both professional and personal, was at the heart of it. One evening, as they stood in what was now their penthouse, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, Winifred spoke the words that had been on her mind. "Do you ever regret it? Us?" Vance turned her to face him, his eyes intense. "Never. You make me better. Not just as a CEO or an innovator, but as a person. You make me want to be the man you see when you look at me." "And what man is that?" "Someone who isn't afraid to build things in garages. Someone who can run an empire without letting it run him. Someone worthy of your love." Tears shimmered in Winifred's eyes. "You've always been worthy. You just needed someone to remind you." As night fell over the city, they stood wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that what they had found was rare and precious. Their love wasn't just about romance or passion. It was about understanding, growth, and the courage to be vulnerable. In the boardrooms of Wall Street, they were still the power couple making headlines and breaking records, but in quiet moments like this, they were simply Vance and Winifred, two souls who had found in each other the missing pieces of themselves. Their love had bloomed like a rare flower in the concrete jungle of Manhattan, defying expectations and breaking conventions. And as they held each other in the gathering darkness, they knew that this was just the beginning of their story. Chapter 5. Rising Tides. March winds swept through Manhattan's concrete canyons, carrying with them the first whispers of spring and the growing murmurs of discontent. Vance and Winifred's love had blossomed into something beautiful and rare, but paradise rarely remains untouched by shadows. The morning began like any other in their penthouse apartment. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows as Winifred prepared coffee in the kitchen, wearing one of Vance's dress shirts. The domestic tranquility of the scene made Vance's heart swell as he watched her from the doorway. "You're staring," she said, without turning around, a smile in her voice. "Can you blame me?" He moved to wrap his arms around her waist, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. "You make morning coffee look like fine art." She turned in his embrace, offering him a sip from her cup. "Flattery will get you everywhere, Mr. Draven." Their morning ritual was interrupted by an urgent message on Vance's phone. His expression darkened as he read it. "What is it?" Winifred asked, instantly alert. "The Wall Street Journal is running a piece about us. Apparently someone's been talking to the press." He showed her the preview of the article, its headline glaring, "Romance or Ruin. Love affair threatens Draven Empire." Winifred read quickly, her face growing more serious with each line. The article questioned her rapid rise within the company, implying that their relationship had begun long before her promotion. It cited anonymous sources claiming she had manipulated her way into both Vance's bed and his boardroom. "They're trying to discredit everything I've achieved," she said quietly, placing the phone down with careful control. "Everything we've built." Vance's jaw clenched. "I'll have PR handle this. We can issue a statement." "No." Winifred's voice was firm. "We prove them wrong with results, not words. The quantum system launches next week. Let's show them exactly why I'm here." He studied her face, seeing the determination beneath the hurt. This was one of the countless reasons he loved her, her unwavering strength, her refusal to be diminished by others' prejudices. "Have I told you today how extraordinary you are?" he asked, pulling her close. "Not yet," she smiled, though her eyes remained troubled, "but the day is young." At the office, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Whispers followed them through the corridors, dying away as they passed. Some employees couldn't meet their eyes, while others watched with barely concealed curiosity. The morning executive meeting was worse. Bernard Matthews made several pointed comments about maintaining professional standards and avoiding distractions. Each word was carefully chosen, each barb thinly veiled. Winifred sat through it all with perfect composure, her back straight, her expressions neutral. But Vance could see the slight tremor in her hand as she took notes, the way her knuckles whitened around her pen. When she presented the latest quantum system results, her voice was clear and confident, her data impeccable. The system had outperformed all projections, potentially saving the company billions in market fluctuations. "Impressive numbers," Matthews said smoothly, though one wonders about the methodology. The implication hung in the air like poison. Before Vance could respond, Winifred spoke. "The methodology is documented in detail in the reports before you, Mr. Matthews. Every calculation, every algorithm, every line of code has been independently verified. Unless you're suggesting that the laws of quantum physics themselves are showing me favoritism." Her response, delivered with ice-cold precision, brought several smiles to the faces around the table. Matthews flushed, but said nothing more. After the meeting, Vance found Winifred in her office staring out the window. "I'm sorry," he said softly, closing the door behind him. "I never wanted my name, my position, to overshadow your brilliance." She turned to face him, her eyes fierce. "Don't you dare apologize for loving me. What we have, it's real and true and worth every whisper, every lie, every challenge they throw at us." Moving to her, he took her hands in his. "When did you become so wise?" "Around the same time you became so sentimental," she teased, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. That evening, they returned home to find Eleanor Draven, Vance's mother, waiting in their living room. Her elegant figure was silhouetted against the sunset, her disapproval as palpable as the dying light. "Mother," Vance said, his voice carefully neutral, "to what do we owe the pleasure?" Eleanor's gaze fixed on Winifred, assessing and cold. "I had hoped the rumors weren't true, that my son hadn't completely lost his mind." "Mrs. Draven," Winifred began, but Eleanor cut her off with a raised hand. "Do you know what they're saying? That you've bewitched him, that you're after the Draven fortune. The board is losing confidence. Shareholders are nervous." She turned to Vance. Your father built this empire from nothing. Will you let it crumble for a passing infatuation? Enough. Vance's voice was quiet, but carried an authority that made even Eleanor pause. Winifred isn't a passing anything. She's the woman I love, the most brilliant mind in our industry, and if you can't see that, then you're blinder than I thought. Love? Eleanor laughed bitterly. Love doesn't build empires, Vance. Love doesn't keep shareholders happy. Love built this, Winifred interrupted, her voice strong. Our love for the work, for innovation, for creating something meaningful. The quantum system that's revolutionizing our industry, that came from our collaboration, our shared vision, the record profits you're so worried about losing. They're the result of two people who push each other to be better, think bigger, dream higher. She stepped forward, meeting Eleanor's gaze directly. I love your son, Mrs. Draven. Not his name, not his money, not his position. I love the man who still wants to build things in garages, who sees possibilities where others see problems, who chooses to be kind when the world expects him to be cold. The room fell silent. Eleanor looked between them, something shifting in her expression. You'll have to prove them all wrong, she said finally, gathering her coat. Every day, every deal, every decision will be scrutinized. We know, Vance said, taking Winifred's hand. We're ready. After Eleanor left, they stood together at the window, watching the city lights emerge as darkness fell. Are we? Winifred asked softly. Ready? Vance turned her to face him, his hands framing her face. Together, we're ready for anything. As they held each other in the gathering darkness, both knew that this was just the beginning of their challenges. The tides were rising, bringing with them greater tests of their love and resolve. But in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms, they were stronger than any force that sought to tear them apart. Their love wasn't just about romance, it was about partnership, trust, and the courage to stand together against whatever storms might come. Chapter 6. The Proposal. April in the Maldives painted the world in shades of impossible blue. Vance had arranged for a week away from Manhattan's chaos, telling the board it was a much-needed strategic retreat. In reality, he had spent months planning this moment, knowing that their love story deserved a chapter as extraordinary as their journey. The private villa stood on stilts over crystal-clear waters, with glass floors revealing the vibrant marine life below. Winifred had spent their first day marveling at everything, the endless horizon, the perfect white beaches, the way the stars seemed close enough to touch. I never imagined places like this actually existed, she said on their second evening, as they watched the sunset from their private deck. She wore a flowing white dress that caught the breeze, her natural hair adorned with small white flowers. Vance watched her, his heart full. In the soft golden light, she looked like something from a dream, his brilliant, beautiful Winifred, who had changed his world in ways he was still discovering. There's something I need to tell you, he said, taking her hand. She turned to him, concern flickering across her features. Is everything all right? The board meeting yesterday. Forget the board, he smiled, leading her to the edge of the deck, where the infinity pool seemed to merge with the ocean. Forget Wall Street, forget Draven Enterprises, forget everything except this moment. The sun was setting behind them, painting the sky in spectacular shades of pink and gold. Below, the water had turned to liquid fire, reflecting the heavens. Winifred Walker, Vance began, his voice soft but steady. Before I met you, I thought I knew what success meant. I had built an empire, earned billions, become everything the world expected a Draven to be. But I was just going through the motions, living up to a name instead of being true to myself. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small box of blue velvet. Winifred's breath caught as he dropped to one knee. You changed everything. You showed me that true success isn't about profit margins or stock prices. It's about having the courage to be authentic, to chase dreams, to love without reservation. You make me want to be better, to build things that matter, to leave a legacy worth more than money. Opening the box, he revealed a stunning ring, a rare blue diamond set in platinum, surrounded by smaller white diamonds that caught the dying light like stars. This ring, he continued, is special. Like you, it's one in a million. The blue diamond was formed billions of years ago under impossible pressure, just waiting to be discovered. Like our love, it's both ancient and new, both strong and beautiful. Tears were flowing freely down Winifred's cheeks now, but her smile was radiant. I had a whole speech prepared, Vance admitted, his own eyes glistening, about quantum entanglement and how two particles, once connected, remain linked no matter how far apart they are, about how that's what we are, two souls inexplicably, irreversibly connected. But looking at you now, in this perfect moment, all I can say is, I love you. I love your brilliant mind, your generous heart, your unwavering strength. I love how you challenge me, support me, believe in me. He took a deep breath, his voice thick with emotion. Winifred Walker, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me, face whatever comes together and make every day an adventure? For a moment, Winifred couldn't speak. She looked at the man before her, the powerful CEO on his knee, vulnerable and honest and completely hers, and felt her heart might burst with love. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes. 1,000 times yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, their private stretch of ocean erupted in light. Vance had arranged for bioluminescent plankton to be seeded in the water, creating a magical display of living light that surrounded them like a galaxy of blue stars. Winifred gasped at the spectacle, then laughed with pure joy as Vance lifted her into his arms, spinning her around on the deck. "How did you do all this?" she asked, breathless. "I have my ways," he smiled, setting her down but keeping her close. "Though I should warn you, I may have also arranged a small celebration." On cue, soft music began playing from hidden speakers, and their private chef appeared with champagne and an elegant dinner for two. As they dined under the stars, surrounded by the gentle sound of waves and the ethereal glow of the bioluminescence, they talked about their future. Not about board meetings or market strategies, but about their dreams. Traveling the world, starting a family, building a legacy of innovation and compassion. "We'll face opposition," Winifred said softly, running her finger over the perfect blue diamond. "Your mother, the board, the press. Let them talk," Vance replied, taking her hand. "We've already proved them wrong about everything else. Why stop now?" Later that night, as they lay in bed listening to the ocean, Winifred traced patterns on Vance's chest. "Tell me something you've never told anyone else," she whispered, echoing their habit from early in their relationship. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I've never been more scared of anything than I was of losing you. When the press started their attacks, when the board questioned your abilities, when my mother tried to interfere, I wasn't afraid of losing the company or the Draven name. I was afraid of losing us." She propped herself up on an elbow to look at him, her eyes soft in the moonlight. "You'll never lose me. We're quantum entangled, remember?" Her smile was teasing but tender. No force in the universe can separate particles once they're truly connected. "Is that a scientific fact, Doctor Walker?" he asked, pulling her closer. "It will be," she laughed. "Once I revolutionize quantum physics in my spare time." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the ring glowing softly in the darkness like their own private star. The world and its challenges would still be there tomorrow, but for now they had this perfect moment, this promise of a future filled with love, innovation, and endless possibilities. Morning found them on their private beach, walking hand in hand as the sun rose over the Indian Ocean. The ring caught the light, sending blue fire dancing across the sand. "Ready to face the world, future Mrs. Draven?" Vance asked, bringing her hand to his lips. Winifred's smile was as bright as the rising sun. "With you, I'm ready for anything." Their engagement, like everything else about their relationship, would make headlines and spark conversations. But as they stood there on that perfect beach, wrapped in each other's arms while the world awakened around them, none of that mattered. They had found in each other not just love, but partnership, understanding, and the courage to dream bigger than either had dared alone. Their story was proof that true love doesn't just survive challenges, it grows stronger because of them. Chapter 7. Wedding Bells and Storm Clouds. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into a fairy tale realm for the most anticipated wedding of the year. Crystal chandeliers cast their ethereal glow over towering arrangements of white orchids, roses, and lilies. Gold accents caught the light like captured stars, while thousands of candles created an intimate atmosphere despite the grand scale of the space. In her private suite, Winifred stood before a wall of mirrors, her heart racing with anticipation. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece that took 3 months to create, a stunning fusion of cultures and dreams. The bodice featured intricate beadwork inspired by traditional African patterns, while the silk skirt flowed like quantum waves, embedded with subtle crystalline designs that caught the light with every movement. A cathedral-length veil, adorned with delicate lace patterns that mirrored the same quantum formations found in their revolutionary trading system, completed the look. "You look like something from a dream," her mother whispered, adjusting the veil with trembling hands. The proud tears in her eyes spoke volumes about their journey. From late nights helping with homework to working multiple jobs to support Winifred's education, every sacrifice had led to this moment. Maya, serving as maid of honor, dabbed at her own eyes while trying to maintain her composure. "Vance is going to stop breathing when he sees you. Actually, everyone is going to stop breathing." The dress had been kept secret from everyone, even Eleanor Draven, who had tried multiple times to suggest more suitable options from prestigious designers. But Winifred had been adamant. Her wedding dress would represent both who she was and who she was becoming, just like their marriage. In another wing of the hotel, Vance stood at a window, Manhattan's skyline a familiar comfort behind him. His custom-made tuxedo was perfection in black and gold, but his usual confident demeanor showed hints of vulnerability. "The board members are all here," reported James Chen, his best man and oldest friend from MIT. "Looking like they swallowed lemons, but here. And my mother. Front row, perfect posture, perfect poker face, though I caught her dabbing her eyes when she thought no one was looking." This brought a small smile to Vance's face. Eleanor Draven had maintained a careful neutrality since their engagement announcement, neither openly opposing nor truly accepting their union. But there had been moments, brief, precious moments, when he'd caught glimpses of the mother he remembered from his childhood, before the weight of the Draven legacy had changed her. The ceremony space itself was a testament to their vision of unity. The traditional wedding arch had been reimagined as an artistic interpretation of quantum entanglement with intertwining gold and silver strands, creating a cosmic dance above them. The aisle was lined with candles in crystal holders, their flames creating a pathway of light. As the first notes of music filled the air, a specially commissioned piece that blended classical wedding march with subtle African rhythms, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. The guests, a who's who of Wall Street elite, mixed with Winifred's close-knit community, turned expectantly toward the doors. The bridesmaids proceeded first, wearing gowns in deep midnight blue that seemed to shimmer with starlight. Then came the flower girls, scattering petals of white and gold, their innocent joy a sharp contrast to the political undercurrents swirling through the room. When Winifred appeared at the entrance, time seemed to stop. Vance, who had practiced perfect control in billion-dollar negotiations, felt tears spring to his eyes. She was radiant, powerful, entirely herself, and soon to be his wife. Their eyes met across the space, and suddenly the hundreds of guests disappeared. There was only this, their love, their truth, their shared dream of something greater than themselves. Winifred's father, a professor of physics who had inspired her love of science, proudly escorted her down the aisle. Each step was deliberate, graceful, a journey from who they had been to who they would become together. Their vows, written in late-night sessions in their penthouse, spoke of more than love. They spoke of partnership, innovation, and the courage to defy expectations. "I promise," Vance declared, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed ballroom, "to be not just your husband, but your partner in all things, to support your dreams, champion your brilliance, and face every challenge by your side. You've shown me that true success isn't measured in market shares, but in moments of shared understanding, in the courage to be vulnerable, in the strength to choose love over expectation. I promise to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me, to honor the brilliant mind and beautiful soul that make you uniquely you." Tears sparkled in Winifred's eyes as she responded, "I promise to be not just your wife, but your constant collaborator in this grand experiment we call life. To challenge you when you need challenging, support you when you need supporting, and love you through every market swing and board meeting. You've taught me that love isn't about losing oneself, but about finding a partner who makes you more completely yourself. I promise to stand with you, dream with you, and build something greater than either of us could imagine alone." The exchange of rings carried deep significance. Instead of traditional bands, they had designed rings that incorporated quantum patterns, eternal loops that represented their unbreakable connection, set with rare blue diamonds that seemed to hold universes within. Their kiss was met with applause that echoed off the gilded ceiling, though keen observers noted several tight smiles among the corporate elite. Betrayal Matthews, daughter of their largest shareholder, left her seat before the ceremony ended, her departure a silent protest that didn't go unnoticed. The reception transformed the space again, showcasing the seamless blend of their worlds. African drums accompanied a classical string quartet, creating a unique harmony that seemed to symbolize their union. Traditional dances mixed with modern choreography, while the menu featured both international cuisine and family recipes, passed down through generations. Their first dance was to a song they had chosen together, its lyrics speaking of love that defies convention and changes lives. Vance held Winifred close, swaying to the music as if they were alone in their penthouse rather than the center of New York society's attention. "Having any regrets?" he whispered against her hair. "Only that we have to share this day with half of Wall Street," she smiled, her eyes sparkling with joy. "You? Just one," he murmured. "That we have to wait until tomorrow to start our honeymoon." They had planned 3 weeks away, a tour of innovation hubs in Africa, combining Winifred's heritage exploration with visits to emerging tech centers. It was a honeymoon uniquely them, blending personal discovery with professional passion. But even in this moment of celebration, storm clouds gathered. Bernard Matthews huddled with other board members, their expressions grave as they watched the newlyweds. Eleanor Draven engaged in intense conversation with key shareholders, her practiced smile never reaching her eyes. Yet none of it could touch the bubble of joy surrounding Vance and Winifred. They had faced every obstacle with unity and grace, turning challenges into opportunities for growth. Their love wasn't just about romance, it was about shared vision, mutual respect, and the determination to build something Extraordinary together. As the evening drew to a close, they stood on the hotel's terrace, the New York skyline twinkling behind them like a backdrop of dreams. "Ready to take on the world, Mrs. Draven?" Vance asked, wrapping his arms around her. Winifred leaned back against him, her wedding ring catching the starlight. "With you? Always." Their wedding day had been perfect, not because everything went exactly as planned, but because they faced it together, their love stronger than any force that sought to divide them. As they looked out over their beloved city, both knew that this was just the beginning of their greatest adventure. The night ended with them slipping away from the reception, hand in hand, leaving behind the whispers and politics for the promise of their future together. In the limousine that would take them to their honeymoon suite, Winifred rested her head on Vance's shoulder, finally able to relax completely. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually did it." "Did you ever doubt we would?" Vance asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Not for a second," she smiled. "Some things are just meant to be, like quantum entanglement. Once two particles connect, nothing can truly separate them." As their car wound through the nighttime streets of Manhattan, they held each other close, newly minted husband and wife, partners in every sense of the word. The challenges ahead would be significant, but their love had already proven itself stronger than prejudice, stronger than tradition, stronger than any force that tried to stand in its way. Their wedding day had been more than a celebration. It was a declaration of love's power to transform, to unite, to create something entirely new from two separate worlds. And as they began their life together, both knew that the best was yet to come. Chapter 8. Paradise Lost. Summer faded into autumn, and with it, the golden glow of their honeymoon period began to dim. The first signs were subtle: missed dinners, delayed text responses, the growing silence in their penthouse that had once been filled with passionate discussions about quantum computing and market innovations. Winifred noticed the change in her husband gradually. Vance's shoulders carried a new tension, his smiles became rarer, and his eyes often held a distant look she couldn't quite read. She found him late at night in his home office, engaged in hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when she entered. One particular evening in September, she brought him coffee, remembering how they used to share it in those early morning meetings that had first brought them together. "The quarterly reports look promising," she said, placing the cup beside him. "The quantum system is outperforming even our highest projections." Vance barely looked up from his computer. "Matthews is concerned about market volatility." "Matthews is always concerned about something," she replied, perching on the edge of his desk. "But our results speak for themselves." Finally he met her eyes, and what she saw there made her heart skip. Worry, exhaustion, and something else: fear. "The board called an emergency meeting tomorrow," he said quietly. "They've been talking to major shareholders. Your quantum system. There are questions about its long-term stability." Winifred felt her blood run cold. Questions? From whom? "The system's performance is documented. Verified." "It's not about the performance." Vance stood, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "It's about us, about how our relationship might be clouding judgment." The words hung in the air like poison. Winifred stepped back, hurt flashing across her face. "You mean how your feelings for me might be clouding your judgment?" "Winnie!" "Don't." Her voice was sharp. "Don't Winnie me when you're sitting there actually considering their implications." He moved toward her, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Have you looked at the data? Really looked? The system isn't just stable, it's revolutionary. But you'd know that if you'd been to any of the development meetings in the past month." Guilt crossed his features. "I've been dealing with the shareholders." "You've been avoiding me," she corrected. Ever since your mother's dinner party last month, when she paraded Brielle Matthews around like some sort of replacement option. The memory of that evening still stung. Eleanor Draven had invited the board members and their families for an intimate gathering that had felt more like a showing of what the Draven Empire could be without Winifred in the picture. Brielle, elegant and well-versed in the social dynamics of their world, had played her part perfectly. "That's not fair," Vance protested. "I'm trying to protect everything we've built." "Are you?" Winifred's voice was quiet now. "Or are you letting them make you doubt us?" She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "The Matthews family is threatening to pull their investment. Bernard has convinced other board members that our relationship poses a risk to the company's stability. They're talking about forcing a vote of no confidence." Winifred felt her world tilting. "And what do you think?" The seconds of silence before his answer were deafening. I think we need to consider all options." The words hit her like physical blows. She turned to face him, tears shining in her eyes. "All options? Like what, Vance? Divorcing me to save your empire? Dismissing me to appease the board? That's not what Isn't it?" She moved to the window, looking out at the city they'd once dreamed of conquering together. "You know what hurts the most? Not that they doubt me, I've dealt with doubt my entire career. It's that you're letting them make you doubt us." Vance approached her from behind, his reflection in the window showing the torment on his face. "I love you." "But is love enough?" she asked softly. "When faced with losing everything you've built, everything your family name stands for, is loving me enough?" The silence that followed was her answer. Winifred wiped her tears, straightening her shoulders. "I'll be staying at Maya's tonight. I think we both need some space to think about what we really want." As she packed an overnight bag, Vance stood in the doorway of their bedroom, looking lost. "Winnie, please." "You know what's ironic?" she said, zipping the bag closed. "The quantum system you're all so worried about. It works because of entanglement, particles that remain connected regardless of distance, that affect each other instantly across any span of space. I thought that's what we had, an unbreakable connection, but maybe I was wrong about both the science and us." She moved past him, but he caught her arm gently. "I'll fix this, I promise." Looking into his eyes, she saw the man she fell in love with, brilliant, kind, passionate, warring with the heir to the Draven Empire, weighted down by expectations and fears. "Some things," she said softly, "can't be fixed with promises or power or money. Some things require choice, Vance, and right now you need to figure out what you're really choosing." The elevator ride to the lobby felt eternal. In her purse, her phone buzzed with meeting notifications about tomorrow's board session. They wanted her to present a full analysis of the quantum system's risks and dependencies. The irony wasn't lost on her. They'd trust her expertise while questioning her integrity. As her car pulled away from their building, Winifred finally let her tears fall freely. She touched her wedding ring, remembering Vance's words about quantum entanglement during his proposal. How foolish they'd been, thinking love could conquer everything. But even as she felt her heart breaking, another part of her, the part that had helped her rise from humble beginnings to revolutionize an industry, was formulating a plan. She hadn't gotten where she was by giving up when faced with opposition. Tomorrow she would face the board. She would defend her work, her integrity, and her love. And Vance would have to decide what mattered more, the expectations of others or the truth in his heart. Back in the penthouse, Vance stood at the window, watching her car disappear into the night traffic. On his desk, divorce papers lay unopened, delivered by Matthew's legal team that morning. He hadn't told her about them, couldn't bear to see more pain in her eyes. But as he stood there, remembering every moment that had led them here, something stirred in his chest. Not just love, but recognition of what he was at risk of losing. Not just his wife, but his partner, his inspiration, his courage to be more than just another draven following the prescribed path. The question was, would he realize it in time? Chapter 9. The Christmas Revelation. The annual Draven Enterprises Christmas Gala transformed the Metropolitan Museum's Temple of Dender into a winter wonderland. Ice sculptures glittered among Egyptian antiquities, while thousands of white lights created the illusion of stars above the glass-enclosed space. It was meant to be a celebration of another record-breaking year, but beneath the festive surface, tension crackled like static electricity. Winifred stood in the ladies' room, taking a moment to steady herself. Her reflection showed a woman both vulnerable and strong. Her emerald green gown hugging curves that had just begun to change, though none had noticed yet. At 3 months pregnant, her secret was still her own, though morning sickness had made board meetings particularly challenging. She touched her still flat stomach, thinking of the ultrasound image hidden in her clutch purse. Twins. The irony of dual entities made her smile despite her nerves. Even her body was dealing in pairs now, as if the universe wanted to remind her about quantum entanglement. The door opened, and Eleanor Draven entered, their eyes meeting in the mirror. For a moment, neither spoke. "He's going to announce the restructuring tonight," Eleanor said finally, her voice carefully neutral. "The board feels it's best to do it publicly, to control the narrative." Winifred turned to face her mother-in-law. "You mean the divorce?" "It's business, Winifred. Nothing personal." "Nothing personal," Winifred laughed softly. "Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night? That destroying your son's happiness is just business?" Eleanor's perfectly composed face showed a flicker of emotion. "My son's happiness. His company is about to face a shareholder revolt. The Matthews family is threatening to pull out completely. The press is having a field day with rumors about your quantum system's stability. How is any of that making him happy?" "Have you asked him?" Winifred stepped closer. "Have you actually looked at your son in the past month? Really looked? Because I have, and I see a man being torn apart by other people's expectations." Before Eleanor could respond, the door opened again. Betrayal Matthews stood there, elegant in white, like a bride in waiting. "They're asking for you both. The announcement is about to begin." The grand hall fell quiet as Vance took the stage. He looked impeccable in his tuxedo, but Winifred could see the strain around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hand as he adjusted the microphone. "Distinguished guests, valued partners, esteemed colleagues," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed space. "As we close another year..." Winifred moved through the crowd, her heart pounding. This was the moment, her last chance to fight for their love, to remind Vance of what really mattered. As she approached the stage, she caught sight of Bernard Matthews smirking, divorce papers probably ready in his briefcase. "Before we continue," she called out, her voice clear and strong, "I have an announcement of my own to make." The crowd parted, creating a path between her and the stage. Vance stopped mid-sentence, their eyes meeting across the space. In that moment, everything else fell away. The board members, the shareholders, the press. There was only them, and the truth she was about to share. Climbing the steps to the stage, Winifred took the microphone. Her hands were steady now, her voice sure. 3 months ago, our quantum system predicted a market shift that saved this company billions. It worked because it understood something fundamental about the universe, that certain things are meant to be connected, meant to exist in harmony, despite all external forces trying to separate them. She turned to face Vance, whose expression had shifted from confusion to concern. "But this isn't about business. This is about love, about family, about the future." She reached into her clutch, withdrawing the ultrasound image. "Vance, I'm pregnant, with twins." The gasp that went through the crowd was audible. Vance stared at the image she held out, his face transforming with wonder and realization. "I didn't plan to announce it this way," she continued, her voice softening. "But I couldn't stand by and watch you throw away our happiness because of other people's fears and prejudices. These babies, our babies, they're proof of what we've created together, not just success or innovation, but love, real, powerful, world-changing love." Tears were flowing freely down her cheeks now, but she stood tall. "I don't care about the Draven Empire or the board's approval or society's expectations. I care about you, the man who saw me for who I really was, who believed in my dreams, who loved me enough to break every rule in his carefully ordered world." The silence in the hall was absolute. Eleanor Draven had gone pale, while Brielle Matthews looked like she'd been slapped. Bernard Matthews was frantically whispering to other board members, but no one was listening. All eyes were on Vance, who hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, his gaze fixed on the ultrasound image in Winifred's hand. Then, slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a folded document, the divorce papers. With deliberate movements, he tore them in half, then quarters, letting the pieces fall to the stage floor. "The only announcement I'm making tonight," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "is that I'm the luckiest man in the world." He turned to face the crowd, taking Winifred's hand in his. "My wife isn't just brilliant. She's brave enough to remind me what really matters. And if anyone has a problem with that with us, you're welcome to take your business elsewhere." The hall erupted in a mix of reactions, applause from some, shocked whispers from others. Bernard Matthews stormed out, followed by several board members. But Vance and Winifred barely noticed, lost in their own world on the stage. "Twins," he whispered, touching her stomach with reverence. "Found out last week." She smiled through her tears. "Apparently, they're as in sync as their quantum counterparts." He laughed, pulling her close. "I've been such a fool. Can you ever forgive me?" "Already have," she murmured. "Just don't make me doubt us again." Their kiss was met with a fresh wave of applause, led surprisingly by Eleanor Draven herself. Perhaps seeing her son's joy, his absolute certainty, had finally broken through her reserved exterior. Later that night, as snow began to fall over Manhattan, Vance and Winifred stood on the museum's roof terrace. He held her from behind, his hands protectively covering her stomach. "I had this whole speech prepared," he said softly, "about restructuring and strategic decisions. But you showed me what real courage looks like." Winifred leaned back against him, watching the snowflakes dance in the city lights. "I just spoke from my heart. Sometimes that's all we can do." "Well, your heart saved us both." He turned her to face him. "I promise you, Winnie, from this moment on, nothing comes before us. Not the company, not the board, not anyone's expectations. You and these babies, you're my real legacy." As they stood there in the gentle snowfall, both knew that while challenges still lay ahead, they would face them together. Their love, like the quantum particles they studied, had proven unbreakable, a force that defied conventional wisdom and rewrote the rules of possibility. In the end, it wasn't just about choosing love over power or family over business. It was about having the courage to be true to oneself, to fight for what matters, and to trust in the unbreakable bonds that connect two hearts meant to be together. Chapter 10. Hearts Reunited. The snow continued to fall over Manhattan as Vance and Winifred's car wound its way home from the Metropolitan Museum. The city had transformed into a winter wonderland, streetlights catching crystalline flakes in their warm glow. Inside the car, they sat close together, his hand protectively covering her still flat stomach, both processing the monumental events of the evening. Twins, Vance whispered again, as if saying it repeatedly would help him fully grasp the miracle. Two little ones growing right here. His voice held a sense of wonder that brought fresh tears to Winifred's eyes. The penthouse was dark when they arrived, the silence now comfortable rather than tense. Snowflakes danced outside their floor-to-ceiling windows, creating a private snow globe around their sanctuary. Winifred moved to the kitchen, a habit from their early days together, to make their favorite late-night coffee. "No coffee for you," Vance said softly, taking the cup from her hands. "Doctor's orders, I assume." She smiled, letting him guide her to their plush sofa instead. "Herbal tea has been my constant companion these past few weeks, though hiding the morning sickness in board meetings has been interesting." His face fell slightly. "I should have noticed. I should have seen the signs, should have been there for you." "Shh." She pressed a finger to his lips. "We're not doing that. No more regrets, remember." Vance caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I need to tell you everything, about the pressure, the threats, my cowardice." "Your humanity," she corrected, "your struggle between duty and love. I understand it all, Vance. I always have." He stood, moving to the window where so many of their important conversations had taken place. The city sprawled below, a glittering canvas of lights and possibilities. "Matthews had it all planned," he began, his voice low. "The divorce announcement, the transfer of power, the amicable separation story for the press. He even had a team working on discrediting the quantum system, trying to prove it was unstable without your direct oversight." Winifred joined him at the window, her reflection overlapping with his in the glass. "And Betrayal? Was she part of the plan too?" "A convenient solution," he admitted. "The merger of two financial dynasties, carefully orchestrated by my mother and Matthews. They thought it would stabilize the company, calm the shareholders." He turned to face her. "But they didn't understand something fundamental." "What's that?" "That I stopped being just a Draven the moment I met you. You made me more than my name, more than my position. You made me human." Tears glistened in Winifred's eyes as she reached up to cup his face. "You were always human, Vance. You just needed someone to remind you it was okay to be." He covered her hand with his own. "How can you forgive me so easily? I almost threw away everything we built, everything we are." "Almost," she emphasized. "But you didn't. When it mattered most, you chose us. That's what I'll remember, what I'll tell our children about their father, that when faced with the hardest choice of his life, he chose love." Vance dropped to his knees before her, pressing his face against her stomach where their babies grew. "I swear to you, Winnie, and to them, I will never let anyone or anything threaten our family again. The company, the board, the whole empire could crumble, and as long as I have you three, I'll count myself the richest man alive." Winifred ran her fingers through his hair, remembering the powerful CEO who had interviewed her all those months ago. How far they'd come, how much they'd grown. "Tell me about when you found out," he said, looking up at her. "About the babies. I want to know everything I missed." She led him back to the sofa, curling into his side as she had so many times before. "It was last Tuesday. I'd been feeling off for weeks, but with everything happening, I blamed stress. Then during the quantum system update meeting, the one you had to miss for the shareholders, I suddenly couldn't stand the smell of Marcus's cologne." Vance chuckled. "Marcus does wear rather potent aftershave." "I barely made it to the bathroom," she continued. "Maya found me there, connected the dots, and practically dragged me to her doctor friend that afternoon." Her eyes grew soft with remembrance. "When the ultrasound showed 2 heartbeats. Vance, I've never felt anything like it. Terror and joy and love, all mixed together." He pulled her closer. "I should have been there." "You're here now," she said simply. and you'll be here for all the moments to come." As if on cue, her stomach growled softly. Vance immediately sat up, alert. "You haven't eaten since the gala. What can I get you? What are you craving?" Winifred laughed at his sudden shift into protective mode. "Actually, I've been dreaming about those chocolate croissants from that little bakery near our coffee shop. The one where we had our first real conversation, at this hour." "The babies want what they want," she shrugged, eyes twinkling. Without hesitation, Vance reached for his phone. "Marco owes me a favor. He'll open up for us." 20 minutes later, they sat in the empty cafe where their love story had truly begun. Marco, the elderly owner, had not only opened his doors, but insisted on making fresh coffee for Vance and chamomile tea for Winifred, along with providing a basket of still warm pastries. "For the piccoli," he said with a knowing smile, patting Winifred's stomach gently before leaving them alone. In the quiet cafe, surrounded by the smell of fresh bread and memories, they began to plan their future. Not just the practical aspects, doctor's appointments, nursery designs, work arrangements, but their dreams for their family. "I want them to know both worlds," Winifred said, breaking a croissant in half. "The innovation and drive of Manhattan, but also the warmth and community I grew up with. I want them to understand that true wealth isn't just in bank accounts." "They'll have everything," Vance promised. "Not just material things, but love, understanding, the freedom to choose their own paths." He paused, considering. I think it's time to restructure Draven Enterprises. Really restructure it, not the way Matthews planned." Winifred looked up, curious. "What do you mean?" "The quantum system isn't just a trading tool, it's the future. We should be focusing on innovation, on using technology to make the financial world more accessible, more equitable, the kind of legacy our children could be proud of." "The board will resist." "Let them." His voice was firm. "We'll build something new, something that matters. Together." As they walked home through the snow-covered streets, arm in arm, Winifred felt a profound sense of peace. The past months had tested their love in ways she never imagined, but they'd emerged stronger, more certain of their path forward. Back in their penthouse, as the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, they stood once more at their window. Vance held her from behind, his hands curved protectively around their growing miracle. "I keep thinking about quantum entanglement," he said softly. "How particles once connected remain linked forever, responding to each other across any distance. That's us, isn't it? No matter what forces try to separate us, we'll always find our way back to each other." Winifred turned in his arms, reaching up to trace his face. "It's more than that. We're creating new entanglements now, new connections that will last forever. Our babies will be proof that love isn't just about two people. It's about building something larger than ourselves." "Speaking of building," Vance smiled, "we should start thinking about names. Something meaningful, something that reflects both their heritage and their future. Nothing too traditional," Winifred warned. "No Vance Jr." He laughed, the sound free and happy in a way she hadn't heard in months. "What about something scientific, quantum and entanglement?" "Now you're just being ridiculous," she giggled, swatting his arm playfully. As they continued to banter about baby names, the sun rose fully over Manhattan, casting long golden rays across their home. The city was waking up to a world transformed by snow, much as their love had been transformed by the trials they'd faced. They had chosen each other, chosen love over expectations, truth over appearance, family over empire. And in doing so, they'd created something far more valuable than any business empire, a legacy of love, courage, and unwavering commitment to what truly matters. Chapter 11. Redemption's Dawn. January brought with it a sense of renewal, both in nature and in the halls of Draven Enterprises. The aftermath of the Christmas gala had sent shockwaves through Wall Street, but not in the way their opponents had expected. Instead of scandal, the press painted a story of love triumphant, of innovation and tradition finding harmony in the modern age. Vance sat in his office, reviewing the latest board nominations. After Matthew's dramatic exit, along with his closest allies, spaces had opened up for fresh perspectives. His mother, surprisingly, had been instrumental in helping identify suitable candidates, ones who valued innovation as much as stability. "Your father would be proud," Eleanor said, standing in his doorway. Their relationship had shifted since the gala, her initial resistance melting into cautious acceptance, then blossoming into genuine support. "Of the board changes?" Vance asked, looking up. "Of the man you've become." She moved into the office, settling into a chair. "I was wrong, you know, about Winifred, about what the company needed, about everything." Before Vance could respond, Winifred appeared in the doorway, her slight baby bump now visible beneath her elegant maternity dress. "Am I interrupting?" "Never," Eleanor smiled, standing to greet her daughter-in-law. "I was just telling Vance how wrong I was about you." "Should I get this in writing?" Winifred teased, accepting Eleanor's embrace. The change in their relationship had been one of the most unexpected and welcome developments of the past month. "I've already drafted the press release," Eleanor replied dryly, showing her own emerging sense of humor. "Now, have you two decided on the nursery theme? Because I have some ideas." Vance watched his mother and wife discuss color schemes and furniture arrangements, marveling at how life could change so completely. Just months ago, the idea of them sharing a casual conversation would have seemed impossible. Later that evening, in what would become their new tradition, Vance and Winifred sat in the newly designated nursery space, planning their future. The room, once a formal study, was being transformed into a sanctuary for their growing family. "What about this one?" Winifred asked, showing him a design on her tablet. The concept featured constellations and quantum patterns subtly woven into a celestial theme. "Perfect," he smiled. "Though I'm still advocating for a small stock ticker in the corner." She threw a paint swatch at him. "Our children will not be checking market updates from their cribs. They're Draven walkers," he countered. "They might surprise us." The playful moment was interrupted by Winifred's sudden gasp. Her hand flew to her stomach. "What is it?" Vance was instantly at her side, concern etched on his face. "They're moving," she whispered, grabbing his hand and placing it where she had felt the flutter. "Both of them, I think. Like they're dancing." For several minutes, they sat in wonder, feeling their babies make their presence known. Tears glistened in Vance's eyes as he felt the subtle movements beneath his palm. "Hello, little ones," he murmured. "We've been waiting to meet you." The moment was captured by Eleanor, who had come to drop off nursery fabric samples. The photograph would later take pride of place in their family album. Vance and Winifred, bathed in the golden light of sunset, his hand on her belly, both faces illuminated with joy. The following weeks brought more changes to their world. The quantum system, now fully implemented across all divisions, was revolutionizing not just Draven Enterprises, but the entire financial industry. Winifred, despite her advancing pregnancy, continued to refine and improve the technology, though now she did most of her work from a specially designed home office. One particularly memorable morning, Vance found her surrounded by holographic displays, directing her team through quantum calculations while absent-mindedly eating the strange food combinations she had begun craving. "Pickles and ice cream?" he asked, eyeing her snack with amusement. "The babies appreciate quantum physics more when it's accompanied by unexpected flavor combinations," she replied without missing a beat. "Besides, your son is particularly fond of dill pickles." "My son! So now they're my children when they make you crave odd things." "Precisely. She smiled, then turned serious. Have you thought more about what we discussed? About the foundation? Vance sat beside her, helping himself to a pickle. Without the ice cream, the Draven Walker Foundation had been Winifred's idea. A way to combine their business acumen with their desire to make a real difference in the world. I've drafted the initial proposal, he said. Focus on educational access, technological innovation, and community development, starting with programs in both Manhattan and your hometown. Winifred's eyes filled with tears, something that happened frequently now, much to her frustration. Our children will grow up knowing that true success means lifting others as you rise. They'll grow up knowing a lot of things, Vance agreed. Like how their mother revolutionized an industry while carrying them, how their grandmother learned to challenge her own prejudices, how their father almost lost everything that mattered before finding his way back to what's real. They spent that evening in their favorite way, together on their terrace, watching the sun set over their beloved city. Winifred's pregnancy had progressed enough that they could see distinct movements beneath her skin, little hands and feet pressing against their world. They're going to be fighters, she observed, watching a particularly energetic series of movements, already testing boundaries. Like their mother, Vance smiled, his hand joining hers over her belly, though hopefully with a bit of their father's caution. Just enough to keep them from completely upending the financial world before they're 10, she agreed. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the city and the occasional kick from their active twins. I've been thinking, Vance said finally, about legacy. Not the Draven legacy or even the company's future, but what we want to leave for them. He gestured to her stomach. And what conclusions have you reached? That the most important inheritance we can give them isn't wealth or social position or even our quantum innovations. It's the truth of our story, how love can transform, heal, and create something entirely new. Winifred turned to face him, her eyes soft in the fading light. Tell me more. I want them to know how their mother's brilliance didn't just change an industry, it changed a man. How their grandmother learned that love is stronger than tradition. How sometimes the biggest risk you can take is believing in someone else's dream. As if in response, both babies kicked simultaneously, making them laugh. I think they approve, Winifred smiled, then winced slightly, though they could express it a bit more gently. Vance knelt before her chair, addressing her stomach directly. Now listen, you two. Your mother is doing very important work between growing you and revolutionizing global finance. Perhaps you could show your appreciation with slightly less aggressive movements. The kicks actually seemed to soften, making them both laugh again. Already responding to reason, Winifred observed. Definitely your influence. With your determination, he added, they'll be unstoppable. As night fell over Manhattan, they remained on their terrace, planning and dreaming. The nursery would blend innovation with warmth, just like their family. The foundation would create opportunities for others to rise. Their love, tested by fire and stronger for it, would show their children what was possible when you chose truth over expectation, courage over conformity. Thank you, Vance said softly, breaking another comfortable silence. For what? For not giving up on me. For fighting for us when I lost my way. For... He placed both hands on her stomach, feeling their miracles move beneath, for giving me everything I never knew I needed. Winifred covered his hands with her own. Thank you for finding your way back, for choosing us, for being brave enough to rewrite the rules of what a Draven could be. Above them, stars emerged in the darkening sky, distant points of light that had traveled across space and time to reach them. Like their love, like their babies, like every true miracle, Some things were worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth believing in against all odds. They were creating something new, not just two lives growing steadily stronger, but a new way of being, a new definition of success, a new kind of legacy, one built on love, courage, and the unshakable belief that together anything was possible. Chapter 12. New Beginnings. The warm June afternoon filled Mount Sinai's private maternity wing with golden light. After 18 hours of labor, the moment they had been waiting for had finally arrived. Winifred's strength and determination, which had revolutionized an industry and transformed a dynasty, now focused on bringing their miracles into the world. Vance hadn't left her side once. His usual commanding presence softened into something more vulnerable, more real. He held her hand through every contraction, whispered words of encouragement, and proved that the man who could control global markets could also be utterly helpless in the face of nature's greatest miracle. "They're coming fast now," Dr. Chen announced, her calm voice steadying them both. "The first baby is ready." Winifred squeezed Vance's hand with surprising strength. "Talk to me," she breathed through another contraction. "Distract me." "Remember our first meeting?" he began, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. "You walked into my office and changed everything. I thought I was just hiring brilliance, but I was really finding my future." She managed a smile despite her exhaustion. Smooth talker, even now. "It's true," he continued, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You rewrote every rule I lived by, proved every assumption wrong, and now—" His voice caught as a new sound filled the room, their first son's cry, strong and determined. "Baby A is here," Dr. Chen announced, "and he's perfect." Tears streamed down both their faces as they caught their first glimpse of him, tiny, red-faced, and absolutely magnificent. But there was no time to linger. His brother was eager to make his own entrance. "Just like their mother," Vance murmured proudly, "always overachieving." Minutes later, a second cry joined the first. Their family was complete. "Congratulations, Doctor," Chen beamed. "Two healthy boys. Would you like to meet them properly?" The nurses brought their swaddled sons, placing them gently in Winifred's arms. She looked down at their tiny faces in wonder, these perfect beings who had been their constant companions for 9 months. "Hello, my loves," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We've been waiting so long to meet you." Vance perched carefully on the edge of the bed, wrapping his arm around his family. His empire, his wealth, his power, none of it compared to this moment, to these precious lives they had created together. "Marcus Alexander," Winifred said softly, looking at their firstborn, named for her grandfather, who had always believed in education and progress. "And Julian Thomas." Their second son carried Vance's father's name, bridging past and future. The door opened quietly, revealing Eleanor Draven. The normally composed woman had tears in her eyes as she approached the bed, seeing her grandsons for the first time. "They're beautiful," she breathed, reaching out to touch each tiny hand. "Perfect little combinations of you both." The moment was captured by Maya, Winifred's sister, who had slipped in quietly with her camera. The photograph would become iconic in their family. 4 generations of strength and love, the beginning of a new legacy. As the afternoon turned to evening, a steady stream of visitors filled the room with joy and celebration. The board members who had stood by them brought gifts. Their loyal employees sent flowers. Even Bernard Matthews sent a surprisingly heartfelt congratulatory note, perhaps finally understanding that some things were more important than business empires. But the most touching moment came when Marco, their old friend from the coffee shop, arrived with a basket of miniature chocolate croissants for the mama who craved them, and 2 tiny barista aprons for the future coffee connoisseurs. When the visitors had gone and night settled over the city, the new family of 4 shared their first quiet moments together. The babies slept peacefully in their bassinets while their parents watched in wonder. "They're really here," Winifred marveled, her voice soft with exhaustion and joy. "Our quantum miracle times 2. Vance chuckled quietly. Should we tell them they were announced to the world at a Christmas gala, or save that story for when they're older? "We'll tell them everything," she decided. About how their father built an empire but found his heart. About how their grandmother learned that love knows no boundaries. About how quantum entanglement isn't just a theory, it's what happens when souls are meant to be together. Moving to the window, Vance looked out at the city they loved, now transformed by the presence of their sons. The lights of Manhattan sparkled like stars, each one a promise of possibilities. "The Draven Walker Foundation launches next week," he said, turning back to his wife. "A new kind of legacy for a new generation. These boys will grow up knowing that true wealth isn't just in bank accounts. It's in the lives you touch, the changes you make, the love you share." Winifred reached for his hand, drawing him back to her side. "And they'll know that their story began with love strong enough to break through every barrier, defy every expectation, and create something beautiful." As if on cue, Marcus stirred in his sleep, reaching out until his tiny hand found Julian's. Even in their first hours, the twins seemed to sense each other's presence, their connection a mirror of their parents' unbreakable bond. "Look at that," Vance whispered, watching their son's innocent display of unity. "Already inseparable. Like quantum particles," Winifred smiled, "entangled from the very beginning." The night deepened, wrapping the new family in its peaceful embrace. Outside, Manhattan continued its endless dance of lights and shadows, but in this room, time seemed to stand still. Here was everything that mattered. Love that had overcome every obstacle, faith that had weathered every storm, and the promise of a future brighter than any they could have imagined alone. Marcus and Julian slept on, unaware that they were born into more than just wealth or position. They were born into a love story that had rewritten the rules, a family that had chosen truth over tradition, and a legacy that would value innovation, compassion, and the courage to follow one's heart. For Vance and Winifred, this wasn't an ending, but a beautiful new beginning. Their journey had brought them full circle, from that first meeting in his office to this hospital room where their love had multiplied into 2 perfect new lives. They had faced doubt, overcome prejudice, and emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, Vance held his wife close, their hearts beating in sync as they watched their sleeping sons. In this quiet moment, they knew with absolute certainty that every challenge had been worth it. Every obstacle overcome had led them here. Their love story had transformed not just their lives, but an entire world of possibilities. And now, with their sons' first breaths, a new chapter was beginning, one filled with promise, purpose, and the endless potential of love multiplied.